Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our course preview for this week's Players Championship. We got ourselves TPC Sawgrass and the Stadium course, one of the most iconic around the entire world. We're going to get you guys ready for all of your action this week with a look at the golf course, some of the tournament details as well. We'll use Bet the Number to go through some of the course analytics, a whole breakdown, as well as my modeling and comp courses that I'm using to identify my top plays. So by the end, you'll have all the info that you need to get all your research started and hopefully to make the Players Championship one to remember. I'll be there in week all in person, be able to give you guys some of that boots on the ground out there from the course. So excited for that aspect and of course for all of our exposure. So it's not waste any time at all. Go ahead and hop on in with first off a look at the tournament and some of the course details here for TPC Sawgrass. There are actually a few changes here in 2025 that we'll have to talk about, but for the most part, you're talking about your regular old TPC Sawgrass. So a little bit over 7,300 yards for par 72. You've got Bermuda grass from tip to toe, also a bunch of overseed that you have around this golf course. And this year, maybe one change when it comes to the agronomy is that the rough is listed as 4 inches as opposed to 3.5 the last few years. You've got some small greens, peat dye greens around this golf course, a lot of bunkering, a lot of those pot bunkers that he became famous for, and a golf course with water in play on 17 of your 18 holes. So you're going to have to be extremely accurate off the tee, not only to avoid some of that 4-inch rough, which could be a little bit longer out there this year, but also to avoid those doubles and triple bogeys that come along with a lot of those water balls. On top of that, with a peat dye design, you get a lot of risk and reward and none bigger than what you have during that finishing stretch. You've got the par 5 16th, the 17th, the island green where you can choose to go for it or not, and then of course the 18th tee shot, which asks you to take on that water down the left side. It is one of the more volatile venues that we have the entire year, kind of like a TPC Southwind, also over there at the Cognizant Classic with PGA National. A lot of leaderboard movement that can happen late. And now for some of the changes, they've tried to make this golf course a little bit harder here in 2025. So you can see hole number 2, which is a par 5. They added about 15 yards to that, making it a little bit harder to reach into. In fact, over the last few years, it hasn't been reached into by that many players. Adding 15 yards is going to completely change up that hole. Hole number 6 is getting a little bit longer as well, also adding about 15 yards and adding a tree just to the left off the tee that makes your angle off the tee a little bit of a shoot. It's really difficult to get your starting line right, and you could see some people hit that tree. You also have a different tee complex on 11. That's another par 5. That's going to be a little bit longer. And then maybe the biggest change of all is there on number 14, where on the right, it was already a huge slope to the right. You have a water hazard down the left, by the way, at hole number 14. So the miss on 14 is the bailout to the right side, especially like the last few years. It had been well manicured over there, a few bushes, a few flower beds that you could hit into and get into some trouble. But now they've added some natural area. They've made it some of the really deep stuff, made the moguling even more severe than what it was before. So this tells me that they're trying to battle some of the distance gains of these players, and then they're trying to make it even more about your accuracy on hard holes like 14. So I would expect the golf course to maybe play a little bit harder with some of these changes, most notably with a slightly lower birdie rate out there on those par 5s. If you go to some of the averages over the last 3 years, that of course is what we have up here on the Bet the Number site, you'll see that your fairway average is just about your PGA Tour average. They're about average width in terms of your fairways, but you have a lot of water in play, so people really do prioritize going out there and hitting those. You're going to see a lot of people laying up on quite a few tee shots, which we'll talk about here in a second. Your green and regulation rate's a little bit lower than what you would typically see, partially because of how small the green complexes are, only about 5,500 square foot. You also have a slightly lower scrambling rate than what you're used to as well, a lot of because of the trickiness around a peat dye golf course, whether it's the bunkering or even the sloping on the greens, tends to be a little bit more severe at these golf courses than most. That's why your 3-putt percentage is a little bit higher than usual as well. You can see about 1.4% higher at this golf course than your PGA Tour average. Your birdies per round, still higher than your usual. That is a par 72. So, with the 4 par 5s, you are going to see guys take advantage, but your bogey rate is also above the PGA Tour average. And, we don't have the doubles or worse on here, but that average is well above your PGA Tour average. So it's an extremely volatile leaderboard, as we've already mentioned a few times, and you get a lot of carnage when it comes to DFS this week. A lot of the popular plays, even some of the shortest odds players out there in the field, have gone out there and missed the cut around here quite a bit. And in DFS, if you're not incorporating that out there into your process, then you're going to be due for a little bit of a kick in the nuts this week, because it's one of the harder to predict events that we have in the entire year. Taking a look at some of the analytics, you'll see that it's only 9 out of the 14 holes would be driver holes. So so it is not a bomber's paradise by any means. In fact, out of a 10 rating, they've only got it at a 4.2 out of 10 when it comes to that bomber's paradise. Over here with the approach distribution, what you'll notice is that there's a lot of shots coming from 125 to 175. In fact, close to 7 of your 18 approach shots per round are coming in that proximity bucket. So going to be an area of some extra emphasis, I would say, over there for this event. Around the green, you've got a lot of shots coming from 0 to 15 yards, which is telling you that when you're missing around this golf course, it isn't often by very much, but you still have such a low scrambling rate because of how difficult those greens are. And then your putting rates tend to be a little bit lower around TPC Sawgrass because of how tricky the greens are. That is partly why you have so many 3-putts there. And you may say, you have this massive 3-putt percentage, right? How could that possibly be the case when you only have those 5,500 square foot greens? That should tell you how much slope and how tricky these things can be. So that's the test that you get around at TPC Sawgrass. It's not so much the super deep rough that you get at US Opens or PGA Championships. It's not the concrete greens that you got at the API. It is more strategic. It's more about that accuracy off the tee and avoiding those double, triple bogeys. And it's a war of attrition out there over the first 4 rounds. And now for the hole-by-hole breakdown, where we can get a really good feel for how this golf course is played. And hole number 1, it's one where a lot of players won't even hit a driver out there. If you do, it does bring the left and right miss into play, but if you're short right over here, it's also not a really good miss. You've got some deep rough and awkward angle into a lot of the pin locations over here at hole number 1. And though you can't get a full perspective for how difficult these greens are, you miss around the green here, you can see the variety of different shots that you're gonna have. It's not a course where it's just long rough around the greens. You've got some bunkers, you've got some fairway areas, you've also got that rough as you see at some of these other courses, but this is the sort of golf course where you have to be a very well-rounded around the green player. Hole 2 is where you have the 15 yards added, so the tee box is going to be even further back than what they have here on the screen, so a little bit harder to reach into, especially if it is playing into the wind like it oftentimes does. Hole number 3 is 183 yards, no changes here in 2025, but a sneaky difficult par 3. There's a lot of slope in the green. It's a tiered green out there from front to back, and a lot of people, especially when it's a front pin, miss short, and if it's a back pin, you get a lot of people that are missing over there to the right side. Reason for that, of course, is that this bunker there to the long left is absolutely dead, pretty much to every pin location. Hole 4 is 392. This is the hole where I believe Scottie Scheffler holed out when he won this. I did not see the shot in person. I wish I was able to, but I can tell you I heard it from the other side of that golf course. So yeah, this is the hole where he went out there and he spun it into that green to the back left. A ton of slope that you have here as well, and this water comes into play a lot more than you'd think as well because all the slope takes you down towards it. Hole 5 is one of the sneakier hard holes that you have out here. Tee shot is an awkward angle off the tee, especially if you don't fade the golf ball. If you do, it's doable. You just got to go out there and execute a well-hit shot. And then the second shot's where it gets really difficult because some players will end up laying up off the tee there because of the angle, especially if they hit a draw. You might have to hit a 3-wood to make sure you hit the short stuff, and it leaves you like 180 yards into a small and very tricky green complex. 6 is where they added the new tee box, so this is going to play over 400 yards, and then you also have this tree that's going to be blocking you out from the left, so it's almost like you have to hit a draw off this tee to go out there and hit the fairway. And if you can hit the short stuff, it's a gettable hole, and it's going to be a driver, maybe a 3-wood and then wedge out there for these players, but it's going to be a little bit more awkward with the changes they made at the tee. Next up, you have hole 7, which is 450 yards. This is one of the hardest holes that you have out here. It's a little bit of a longer approach shot, especially if you miss the fairway here. You hit the fairway, it can be scoreable, just like every hole around TPC Sawgrass, but if you miss the fairway and you're dealing with a very awkward angle, in fact, you'll have players that miss over here in the woods to the right that have to end up laying up back into the fairway. Hole 8's the hardest par 3 for my money around this golf course. It is over 230 yards. Oftentimes they will move up the tee box though to make it more manageable, as this green complex is much harder than it probably should be for a 200 plus yard par 3. Like, you would think that they would make it an easier green. They didn't. It's one of the hardest that you have out there. Hole 9 is 589. This is one of the longer par 5s that you have out here, so no need to go out there and extend this one. It's hard to reach into anyways, but this green complex, because it is a par 5, should be and is extremely difficult. Hole 10, so if you start on the backside, you do have a kind of similar hole to hole 1, I'd say. A little bit of dogleg from right to left, a little bit of a pitch and putt par 4. You can choose to take driver and be a little bit more aggressive and take it towards the green, but that is usually only the play for the most long players in the field, right? Your elite tier bombers, and when it's playing downwind. Hole 11, they added another tee box too, so this is going to play over 580 yards. It's going to make it very difficult to reach into now. So I think you're going to see this play as a 3-shotter for a lot of the players. And, with a favorable wind, your longer players are still going to go for it in 2, but it is no longer an automatic go for it in 2 situation. Hole 12 is 370, so no changes here, but they do make this one drivable from time to time just because of the water down the left. If you do make it a drivable par 4, it does ask you to be relatively precise. Hole 13 is 185. This is a tricky par 3, especially with a left side pin location. Right side isn't as tricky, but it's still a long iron shot out there into one of these tricky TPC Sawgrass greens. 14 is where they have the changes down the right side. I already mentioned the water down the left, but to the right here is where you're going to get that long natural grass that they were talking about. And then these moguls, you can kind of see them from the overhead view there. They're going to be even more severe than what they were before. So, the obvious bailout here was just to hit it to the right and then try and get something up near the green and get up and down. Now you have no choice, right? You hit it to the right, you're going to be screwed, probably hacking out. You miss left, it's a hazard most times, unless you get caught by that bunker there. You have to go there, hit a perfect tee shot here towards that white marker. It is a wide fairway. It's not an impossible shot to go out there and hit, but now if you decide to bail out, right, take the easy way out, you're not going to have that option here in 2025. 15 is 467. This can be a scoreable par 4 if you hit the fairway, which, again, you can just continue to hear that trend time and time again. 16 is the beginning of the most infamous 3-hole stretch in golf. This is a reachable par 5, and you can see here at 528, you're going to see some eagles here because it is a long iron for a lot of your longer players. But you have the water down the right, a lot of slope on this green, and you can have some doubles there as well. 17 is the island green. If you guys are looking for me on premises and I'm not following a group, I'll be sitting up on that bank to the left, just taking in all the action there at 17. Not much that needs said here, right? I think we've all seen this hole enough to kind of know how it plays. And if on the 18, you've got the water down the left side, it is an extremely difficult tee shot, and like 14, the bailout's to the right? You hit it over there in the trees, and then, if you get a really lucky window, maybe you can go for the green. But if you're going out there tied for the lead, or God forbid with just a 1-shot advantage heading into the final hole, you've got to nut up and hit this fairway, because if you miss left, you're screwed. You're probably lost the golf tournament. You go out there and do that, but you miss to the right, and you're probably looking at bogey at best. And, if you can miraculously make a par, right, it'd be just that, right? A 20, 30 percentile sort of par. So it's the kind of course where you've just got to go out there and nut up at times and hit the golf shot. And I love that about these Pete Dye designs. Now that we've seen the course and the shots required, let's go through some of our key stats this week that I'm using to identify my top plays. And we've got the Bet the Number model loaded up here. In the first category we've got, it's going to be off the tee. So this is a course where you've got to be more accurate than long, but you can't completely ignore your bombers. That, of course, is going to be extremely valuable on those par 5s. That drivable par 4 that they could make available over the weekend, that's where you're going to see that kind of separate. So, guys like Rory McIlroy winning here would be examples of bombers getting the job done. Hell, even guys like Scotty Scheffler have elite tier distance and accuracy out there in the bag. So having that kind of combination is going to be a lethal combo. So you can see towards the top some of your best off the tee players. You got Scotty down there at number 6 out there in that category. But guys like a McIntyre, Hoey, Celinda, Toasty that you might not think of around a TPC Sawgrass, you have to give a little bit of a bump to. But what I'll say looking over there at the weighting for this week on the BTN model is that the off the tee is maybe a little bit de-emphasized compared to where it normally is. Some of that emphasis, some of that modeling weight goes over here to the distance of edge of fairway, which does give us a really good sense for the players that are the most accurate in the field. Being accurate can keep you out of some of those hazards, and you can see with some of the changes that they made to the golf course that accuracy is going to be at a premium. So guys like a Ben Coles, Aaron Rye that are extremely accurate, Lance Griffin, of course, Colin coming in off the amazing week over there at the API are all players that have a distinct advantage there. You got API champion Russell Henley, Tom Kim, Bazane, who's really been hitting the ball well over the last few events, are all players that get an advantage when it comes to their accuracy off the tee. You've also got approach play, so regular approach play that they're mixing in, always a staple of any shots gained analysis. Not much we have to say there other than maybe to point out some of your top level players. Nick Taylor gaining about 1.3 shots per round. Justin Thomas hitting the ball extremely well, both off the tee and over there with his approach play. Nikolai Højgaard, Henrik Stenson, and Sepp Straka, all players that grade out very well with their iron play heading into this event. If we're going to zoom in on any category in particular, this 125 to 200 range is going to be where BTN's putting their marbles. And, if we went back to the approach distribution that we went through before, that's where a lot of your shots are coming from. So, Laurie Cantor's a little bit of a small sample size guy over there from the DP World Tour. Same thing with Camilo, right? Not playing every single event. You can say the same thing about guys like a Norlander, a Phillips. But when you start to get down here to guys like Doug Gim, right? We're seeing them quite often out here. Will Zalatoris, Jake Knapp, right? Playing in a lot of these signature level fields. These are the guys that, at least to me, are the most impressive when it comes to that category. But in general, hitting those mid to long irons is going to be a premium this week, especially with all the layups that you have around this golf course. You've also got around the green over here on the overseed, which of course you have from tip to toe out there at this golf course. So players that excel on this type of grass at hitting chip shots would be players like Hideki Matsuyama, Minwoo Lee, and also Denny McCarthy. You can see the whole top end of the list there, but with how tricky the around the green shots are, if you can go out there and separate in that category, it's not usually something that we take all that seriously, but 5,500 square foot greens, if it gets windy at any point, you're going to have that around the green play. You could gain 3-4 shots gained in this category, and I wouldn't be completely mind blown on a week like this. We're also looking at the putting from 6 to 18 feet. That's where you can find a lot of your separation around a TPC Sawgrass, and because you have small greens, it's not oftentimes that you're having 30, 40 foot putts, right? If you're going out there hitting your irons well, a lot of times you're going to have sub 20 feet out there for a birdie. So players that have really putt well in that proximity bucket be guys like an Aldrich Puttgator, Will Chandler, Frankie Sapin III, all grading out very well. Some of them smaller sample size guys, but guys like a Bridgman we've seen play quite often. In fact, signature event at the API. Matthew Pavon, same thing. Not the best form by any means, but guys that really fill it up in this proximity range. You can marry up some of these short game stats, or if you can, over here with some of these ball striking stats, that's where you find a way towards the top end of the model. So if we go over here and sort by model score now, go ahead and show you guys the top end of the board. Number one's Colin. He's got the short game categories and those ball striking stats are a perfect example of what we're looking for. But Nick Taylor also grading out very well from that 6 to 18 foot range. Can't make anything short. Sub 5 feet, he has been dreadful over the last month or so, but you get him a little bit further from the hole and he's been excelling. So maybe a guy to take a look at there. But Sepp Straka really grading out well at this golf course. Played well at the Cognizant Classic, which, by the way, PGA National, I think is a good comp course for what we're going to have here. Hint, hint. We'll be talking about that here in a second. Scotty down there at number 5, kind of surprising that he grades out that low, in my opinion. Justin Thomas, of course, has played very well at this golf course in the past as well. Kind of surprising that he grades down there at number 9. So in my modeling, I think I'm going to go a little bit heavier on the ball striking than what I have with some of these short game categories, because for me in my modeling, I'm hoping to see guys like Scotty Scheffler, Justin Thomas, a little bit higher towards the top end of that list, because that's what you get at a golf course like this, right? You get the ball strikers that normally feed their way towards the top. It's extremely variant, but what you usually get every single year at this golf course is a leaderboard by Sunday that's the elite of the elite, right? You might have 1, maybe 2 surprise players towards the top, but a lot of times those surprise players are like a Doug Gim, who's one of the best ball strikers that we have out here on tour. It's Aaron Rye, a Daniel Berger, right? When he wasn't in the best form, going out there and playing well here, not so much. You're putting it around the green specialist. So BTN model, I love a lot of these stats that they're looking at. It's just that I may tinker it just a little bit to get some more ball strikers. For our comp courses, we're looking for tracks that prioritize your accuracy off the tee and that also favor a mid to long iron proximity bucket. So first off, we got the RBC Heritage, another Pete Dye design. So you have that in common out there between 2 different courses, but also a track that favors some of those more precise players. So of course, Scotty Scheffler, back-to-back champion here, also won the RBC Heritage. So you have that out there in common, but you have some elite tier players like Wyndham Clark showing up at both tracks. So it's not like you have to be an accuracy guy to go out there there and get the job done. You're going to have high pedigree players that show up towards the top end of the board, but also your JT Postons, right? Your more accurate players like a Chris Kirk that have played well around the RBC Heritage that you'll see showing up at the Players Championship from time to time. You know, those players that maybe aren't as prolific, right? They're not known as maybe elite tier players out there around the PGA Tour. They can get the job done with a really good week around the Players because it's not a US Open or PGA Championship type of setup. So we go to the year before that, we can also learn quite a bit from that. That's the year that Matt Fitzpatrick ended up winning, right? He's not one of those elite tier bombers by any means, so he kind of shows us the kind of skill set that can get it done there. But Hayden Buckley, he finished top 5 that year. Brian Harmon, guys like even Grillo, you wouldn't say that bombers off the tee, are all guys that kind of fit that kind of skill set. Year before that's when Jordan Spieth won at the RBC Heritage. You also had guys like Matt Kuchar, Shane Lowry, JT Poston up there in the top 3 that year. Also Sepp Straka, who, by the way, we're going to see a lot of Sepp Straka out there this week. I have a feeling that he's going to make some of my exposure. The perfect course fits around this kind of course. We also got PGA National and the Cognizant Classic, so we can take a look at that out there from just a few weeks ago. But another course where there's a lot of layups off the tee, a bunch of water in play like what you're going to have this week. It's a really difficult around the green golf course. Now this year maybe not so much, just because of the fact that they had that overseed going, but especially before this year I think it's a good comp. So we're actually going to ignore 2025, and I know it sounds crazy, and we're also going to ignore that year. But let's go to the year before that when Chris Kirk won, right? A lot of these shorter, more positional players that were up there towards the top, and some of your short game specialists. And what do you notice, right? Sepp Straka there in T5, Shane Lowry, who is somebody we're going to have to look at in this field, Chris Kirk, Eric Cole up there towards the top end of the board. And if you go to the year before that, you'll see that it's a very similar sort of leaderboard. A lot of your more positional, accurate, really good around the green players that were showing up that are going to have a chance around a Players Championship. We also have TPC River Highlands, which is another track that's shorter, another Pete Dye design, right? You can tell that that is partly what we're going here with 2 out of these 3 comps, but also a track that's got water in play and it's more positional. So Scotty Scheffler did win here too. So, you know, he just won everywhere last year, so we shouldn't be that surprised. But we had guys like Tom Kim, Tom Hoagie also play very well at that sort of track. You know, your Brian Harmon, Shane Lowry's also finishing in the top 10. Go to the year before that, that's when Keegan Bradley went and won up in his hometown up there in the Northeast. But you had guys like Brian Harmon, Zach Blair play well there. Ches Reavie, right? He's a perfect example, one of those shorter, more positional players that are also going to have a chance around a Players Championship. And year before that's when JT Poston finished in second to his Xander Schauffele. But you've got these shorter guys like Chesson Hadley, Kevin Kisner, wow, throwback there, back from 2022, that can play well at these more positional golf courses. So, you know, if you're trying to find some of those diamonds in the rough, maybe those 6-7K value players to go out there and mix in, you might want to use some of this comp course history to go out there and do so. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the course breakdown this week. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button if you haven't already, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. Of course, with the boots on the ground being there all week, I'm going to be able to give you guys a little bit of extra insight on what to expect. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of that when it goes live, as well as to follow my X/Twitter at GSLukeDFS so you guys don't miss any of those live course updates. And make sure you join the Patreon page for all the behind the scenes access as well. We'll have some extra, you know, course report out there, also some player notes I'll be tracking out there during the practice rounds that you guys won't want to miss over here for this week. For a chance to earn access to the Patreon for free, go ahead, give me your winning score out there for the Players Championship. It'll be on a first come, first serve basis. So first comment is going to get the first dibs out there on their guess. And if you get the winning score correct, you're going to win a free month access over there to the Patreon to get all my projections and all of my bets for this week. That's on the DFS side. You have all the spreadsheets I post over there with all my modeling and projections for everyone in the field, as well as over there on the betting side of things with my props on sites like Underdog and Prize Picks. So a lot of course analytics I'm doing there with the props, of course all my exposure out there on those different sites, and getting to see the golf course in person, you know, has its advantages out there on a week like this. So if you guys have been wondering how to get all of that extra info, that's exactly how you can go out there and do so. Let's have ourselves a week over there at the Players. Gonna be a lot of fun, top tier field, top tier golf course out there as well. Let's just hope the weather cooperates, maybe gives us a little bit of some wind out there for a few rounds. I like to see these guys tested around the TPC Sawgrass, but other than that, that's all I've got over here for the course breakdown this week. I appreciate you guys showing all the love here on the channel as you guys do per usual. As I said, smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys throughout the rest of the week.